Thank you. Good morning. So welcome to day 2, which is a day all about learners. So a little brief overview of where we're going today. We're going to start by looking at different education systems, formal and non-formal education systems. We'll be looking at adult learning pioneers and the culture around adult learning. Then we're going to start going through the profile of our learners, and as educators, the more we can understand and know about who it is that is in our class or in our session, the more we can tailor our information, our delivery to meet the needs of our learners. So understanding who our learners are is a really important part about building our learning experience. And then we will look at some of the strengths, barriers and needs of adult learners and some myths around adult education. We're going to look at adult learning styles and learning theory, so understanding how learning happens. After lunch, we're going straight into our micro-teaching 1, and we'll finish in the afternoon with micro-teaching 2 brief and some prep time for your micro-teaching for tomorrow. And then tonight, in the evening session, we're going to look at teaching in different cultures with Ro and Brenna. All right. So Ro and I are going to start in the session this morning. The first activity, who can define the difference between formal and non-formal education before we jump into a group activity?
Okay. Would you consider formal qualification for internationally recognised quals or that kind of thing?
Yeah, as for example, formal education.
Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah.
Sorry. I don't know if formal is just as simple as pre-organised and formal not, or if it's, I don't know.
Let's jump back on that train. Can you give some examples of the sorts of institutions?
Yeah,
or
so I was thinking sort of
environments?
like your high schooling, primary schooling, and then your uni degrees and even TAFE degrees and stuff like that.
Yeah, thank you.
So it's probably more formal, it's probably more structured with an outcome, or a competency, whereas informals often can be something that is not within the curriculum you pick up.
Yeah, so it's about a standardised curriculum and then having qualifications or certificates at the end of that educational experience. What about non-formal education? Who works in non-formal education? Kathy, would you like to talk to what that means for you?
Allowing people to absorb information from whatever source and encouraging them to recognise that that's what they're doing. So whether it be a workshop that I run at the local community garden or at the library, whether it be they've come over for afternoon tea and I happen to be preserving the soak it up stuff that means lifelong learning happens whether you ever get recognition for it or not.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yes. I think within this course we're doing formal learning and we'll get a certificate, and then the informal learning is in the breaks and we're having conversations with other people, or walking around the garden, or learning from Jodie in the kitchen, or
I would think that formal learning has a plan and a curriculum and some predetermined outcomes.
Yeah, so I want to just clarify, we're talking about formal and non-formal rather than formal and informal. So this is a non-formal education setting. Formal education would be what happens through a recognised training organisation like a university, a TAFE, a high school. We're talking about through a standardised regulated curriculum rather than any kind of education that happens outside of that.
So you're talking about... Sorry, you're talking about a system as opposed to a style of teaching.
Yes,
that might be.
Absolutely. Yes.
So in permaculture, the APT is formal education and the PDC is non-formal.
For anyone who doesn't know what the APT is, are you able to define that?
Accredited permaculture training through TAFEs and those kind of institutions.
Yeah,
Or as anyone can theoretically run a PTC.
Thank you. Yeah, so we're talking about the system rather than the style.
Mm-hmm. Is that a criticism of this sort of course? Is that it hasn't got when Rachel spoke drift? Yeah. That in something like this, there's drift.
That is a great segue into our group activity. Thank you so much, Stacey. We are going to break into groups of 6, so just find the groups around you. You'll look at the strengths and the weaknesses and identify any patterns. So you can work in non-formal education because we are interested in the strengths and weaknesses. This group here, you'll be working on formal education as a system. You can be non-formal up in this corner and formal over in this quadrant. So we'll have about 5 to 10 minutes. It's just really quick, a capture of all the information that you know.
And what do we... Okay.
Completely not fair. And you move on. And then that happens in formal education as well.
I'll grab you a piece of paper. Thank you. You've done a great job. Thank you. Hello. I'm going to swap pieces of paper with you. This is a non-formal. Have a read through. See if you'd like to add or change anything. Hello. I'm changing it. This one's yours now. Have a look. See if you can read it. Add anything or take anything, or not take anything away. Add anything.
Related, but that can also be a strength.
Sorry, I'm going to steal this one. It's all right. Hello. I'm bringing you a different one. Have a read through. This is formal education systems. And have a quick discussion. Add anything that you might want. Here we go. This is non-formal. Have a read through and add anything that you might like.
Yesterday about people coming into the PTC.
All right, so let's start looking at the systems, and we can identify the strengths and the weaknesses of the systems when we look at their patterns. When we think in pattern language and we're thinking about formal education systems, is there a pattern that springs to mind? How information or power is transferred through a system? Dendritic. Would you like to draw a dendritic pattern under the formal banner there?
I'm trying to make it look more.
Thank you. Yeah, it's great.
So impressive.
And can you explain why that pattern for you refers to formal education and the way that information or
It's top down, so somebody has all the knowledge and they're teaching, they're teaching other people around the class, and then that keeps going down. And also, I guess the institutions, you've got your principal or your dean, and then it works through the different layers in terms of the organisation and the system.
Can I invite you, and this is for everyone, from now on, when we're speaking to the group, we're not looking at the whiteboard, but we're teaching everyone. So we're all practicing sitting in that facilitator's role, making eye contact, making sure Charlie can hear me out the back when we're explaining about what it is we're talking about.
Do you want us to
Cool.
stand?
If you'd like to stand, you can.
Well, it makes a big difference, I think. Well, you're likely to be standing. Would you? None of you have sat down yet.
Is this in response to like a question like this, or when we're actually micro-teaching?
Micro-teaching, it's up to you, but just now, I don't know what it is about me, but in my sessions, people end up like this, talking directly to me. It's very boring for everyone else, and it's particularly boring for Ro, who has to watch it every single time. So I'm now publicly inviting you not to speak to me, but to speak to everyone else in the room. Yeah. Thank you. Someone explained to me, or to everyone, the strength of this system.
Control.
I call it benevolent dictatorship in a lot of ways. So what the person up the top there is able to do is listen carefully to what's going on underneath. And in the end, they're accountable for making a decision. And sometimes, if they're benevolent about that and they really listen to others, people are quite comfortable with that because they're able to get on with what they need to get on with without feeling like they have to necessarily make a decision together or whatever. So the key to it is the benevolence of that person at the top.
Teaching moment, Shana, you just sat down and looked at Greta the whole time.
Thank you,
Did you hear it?
I did, just.
Nick?
I guess just further to what you were saying in terms of like the back and forth, it's like if that's sorry? Oh yeah, if that's conceived of as like a dendritic structure like the nervous system, you can consider it being like a back and forth. There's sensory input to this centralized point, and then there's the motor output into the periphery. It just depends on whether that kind of centralization, which is the strength of the dendritic or arborescent structure, is in fact in serving the outer extremities, or whether the centralization is just in serving itself. Like the strength there is in its consistency and in its responsiveness to system-wide change immediately, so through that centralization.
Kath, and then we'll move on. Yep.
Furthering that analogy, can I suggest a different pattern drawing? Much more like a skeleton. We've got a spine formed by what is known as curricula, or the foreknowledge that is to be recognised, supported, measured, and acknowledged as being the thing that this certificate represents.
I'm going to pass to Ro on that one. I just also wanted to mention dendritic patterns, energy flows one way. Rivers don't flow back up to their source. Trees also, the energy is not flowing back down. Well, they actually, it's two different dendritic patterns working in this way, working that way. So there's not really an ability in a formal education system, in a dendritic pattern, for information to be going back and forth. That's one of the, we talked about the strengths. One of the weaknesses is it takes a very long time for change to happen in a formal education system, where at the moment we have this redesign or refunding, let me think about the word. Realignment in the TAFE education system that says we only are going to fund courses where there's an immediate job outcome at the end. And permaculture, for one of those, it has had to spend the last few years trying to prove that there's employability at the end of someone studying permaculture at TAFE. That process has taken a number of years already, and we're moving into an uncertain future when we don't know who we're going to need in the future. So how are we only setting funding for people who we need right now. So one of the weaknesses of this system is that it takes a very long time for things to change. And we can definitely continue that conversation at a different time. Ro, would you like to talk about the skeleton?
I think it's quite reasonable, except it's still a dendritic system. It delivers one way. The other thing is there are barriers to entry. You're 4 or 4.5 when you start school. You're 13 when you go into high school. You're something when you go to university. You need entrance, or you need literacy, or you need something. So all these requirements act as barriers. You can think of it as a firewall. There may be a few radical systems. Also, often the curriculum is set by a board of education somewhere, somehow, that we never see and don't know. And it tends to be, it delivers a lot of information. Most children learn to read and write within a few years. It is very, very good where we need societal acquiescence with something. We need people knowing how to drive. Really, it's very helpful. If you've been in the country where there's absolutely no one knows how to drive, or they're just getting cars, as in early Albania or Vietnam, 12,000 accidents a day because no one knew what side of the road they were driving on. So for some things, including, we'll come back to brain surgery, you really want a standardisation and a competence reach. For others, it's highly exclusive, and the person at the bottom has very little chance of sitting there saying, I hate that, I can think of a better way of doing it, getting it back and getting a really necessary change. So that is the formal system, and it has great value. But we have to be careful about it because it's not responsive. And we need adaptation at the moment more than we need almost anything else to cope with the changing world. So it's one way of thinking about it, pros and cons.
I also think about there's inherent privilege barriers to accessing formal education, particularly when we start looking outside of the public schooling system and into more tertiary education options. A lot of people don't have the time to go to tertiary education because they're already working from in high school to support their families. There's other reasons why formal education systems in that tertiary space there are barriers for people, or it's not accessible. But also, if anyone's tried to access an academic paper that's come from an academic institution, what happens? You have to pay for it. So there's this real firewall of, there's network inhibitors of entering, and there's this firewall that's stopping the information coming out.
Can I throw in a strength?
You can throw in a strength, absolutely.
So the formal structures enable livelihood. I'm a teacher that's paid 3 days a week. When I did Cert 3 and TAFE 15 years ago, I got paid off study to flake around and focus my energy on doing permaculture. So there's buildings that are accessible, that schools, and I'm in a really fringe school in a lot of ways, but there is the potential for those spaces. They are community hubs, they've got resources, they've got buildings, they pay staff, there is the ability for communication to go up to the top where there's benevolent dictators, but structurally it's difficult, but there is power for it. There is something in there that can be something in there.
Yeah, thank you. We're going to move on, if that's okay. I'm so sorry. Would you like to put it on the sitting tree if it's really burning? We've just got quite a lot to get through. And I want to reiterate, there's no right or wrong. We're talking about strengths and weaknesses, and there's strengths and weaknesses to both different systems. If we're looking again back at patterns of non-formal education, is there a form of a pattern in pattern language that comes to mind? Charlie? A web? Can you come up and draw a web or a network?
Yeah.
And maybe in the context of permaculture, as how permaculture is spread through non-formal education?
And don't look at Greta.
No, it's okay, you can draw your web.
And it's probably more like this, etc. Great drawing skills. This is why I hang out with Greta Quinn.
Okay, what can you tell me about networks?
About what, sorry?
Networks as a form.
There's more sources of input.
More sources of input. How do they function?
Multi-directional flows.
Yeah.
There's a lot of different ways to get anywhere.
Yeah.
At least notionally horizontal. They're more horizontal than dendritic structure.
Less top.
Yes. Okay. Clear.
Yeah.
Yep.
Horizontally organized.
Yes, I understand. In a power system.
Yeah.
Yep. Cool. Because that's the other way. The other thing is that energy flows in many different directions, not just horizontally, up, down, diagonally, left, right, everywhere. So networks function through links and nodes. What happens if you take out a link?
It's strong and still keeps going.
Yeah. What happens if you take out a node? Mm-hmm. In the dendritic pattern, what happens if you take out a link or a node? Yep. If this is Bill and David, and Jeff's over here, so a lot of the Western Australian permaculture community is sprouting out that way. Over here we have Rob and Francis, so we have Ro, and we have Charlie, and we have lots of people out that way. We have all the people that Rose taught all across the world. We have, so this is looking, we also have from Robin, we have Costas, and we have all of Gardening Australia in the whole world on the internet over here. The network, what are the strengths in an education system of a network pattern? Who's included?
Everybody, it's like more connected, potentially everybody anyway.
Yeah.
More connected.
And what is the strength of that?
It's adaptive.
It's adaptive? Can you explain it more?
Well, yeah, it's adaptive and accessible in that you can enter anywhere you feel like, and provided that you've got an interest in that topic, you divert and move around throughout the web.
It's got redundancy too, so if one node falls out, there's another node that can pick up the whatever's happening.
Yep. It's localized, it can be localized to the context.
I like to view it through the lens, I like to view it through the lens of neuroplasticity. Networks in our mind just operate in the same way. Then signals firing. If you lose one, then our brains are really good at drawing and reconnecting and redirecting that information to keep the integrity of the whole. So in that way, to me, it's more a three-dimensional network. I'm overlapped with East Coast, I'm overlapped with International, I've learnt from multiple teachers, so it's actually a ball of a web kind of deal, for me, the way I can see it.
I saw in one of the pieces of paper that non-formal education, there's no accountability. And I challenge you to think in our communities, if nature's self-organising, what happens if someone's teaching absolute rubbish?
They soon have no students.
Yeah, Ro, did you want to add something?
Well, in the United States, there's a chap who said, I can teach a PDC in 7 days. And the other teachers simply responded and said, we don't recognise your students because that's not possible. That's accountability, that's responsibility, and it's just the community required. So at the moment in permaculture, the network patterns enable CIP, which is a whole special node. What's CIP? Ollie, you know?
CIP.
Children in permaculture.
Oh, children, yes, yeah.
Okay. What about sustainable cities? What about perma-youth, which is sweeping the world at the moment? Food forests has become a really independent area with great professional skill, everything from temperate to tropic areas. It's enabled in depth to develop around certain topics that are regenerative agriculture. Using permaculture design has become a whole specialist field of enormous interest and input. So those things, we're now really, really growing in permaculture for refugees in a very big way. And we didn't know, so it's just started up from the Middle East, in East Africa, in Europe, and we're looking for a Central American node there. So it enables all that stuff to happen. If it's not necessary, it'll just fall out. It won't have enough links, it won't be supported, the node won't hold, and it goes. So it really is a structure. The other thing is every now and again someone's going to say to you, let's have a world permaculture body to control the content and your teachers. So they want a formal structure, and they might approach one of you and say, will you please be on the board, we need to manage this. It's too wild and uncontrollable. What would be your response? We've got to manage, someone said, we've got to manage the quality. We need a head person up there, and we need a board, and we need to control it. First of all, is it possible? How are you going to contact those groups in West Africa working in the Congo and tell them they're teaching? The curriculum isn't quite correct on Swale.
It's too big for that now.
How are you going to qualify the teachers?
Surely it's beyond that, like you say. It's no getting a hold of everyone who's part of that web. It's like gun control in America, that's beyond. It's never going to be reined back in. It's beyond now.
And it's bi-regional by definition almost. It's contextual, it's not the same in any place you go.
I think it would also be draining practitioner resources unnecessarily. It's something which is not needed. And people who would make that call would be better advised work on the local level and getting more done.
Yeah, you need a police, you need permaculture police who undertake everything.
Another specialised group in the network.
It would only be appealing to people that want to reproduce power structures and the roles and the benefits that they bring in the like.
So this happens on merit and need. Merit and need is what rules our system at the moment, which is a broad network. So the non-formal is very, very strong, the formal is very, very strong. I'm slightly opposed to academies that set up and qualify teachers, because often what they're doing is qualifying on the basis of 12 designs or something. Anyway, Greta, we probably need to move on, and we come back to this when we discuss your future later in the week.
Thank you. Yeah, this conversation is very relevant in permaculture, because there's people who do want to codify it and do want to set permaculture into the formal education system model and only allow it to exist there. And there's strengths and weaknesses to that. There's strengths and weaknesses to both systems. I think the speed at which energy can flow, at which it can self-regulate, which it can adapt and localise, are really strong parts of the non-formal education system which permaculture operates in.
And just the entry requirements, you can be any religion, any age, any gender, sex that you like. There are no barriers to joining the PDC under almost any circumstance. We might have some for this course, but we wouldn't have any for a PDC. Doesn't matter if 80% of the classes are literate, you adapt your teaching. It's not a matter of they have to be like this to enter.
Can I make one quick point? That I think there's a fruitful intersection where we, from maybe the can intersect into the formal structures and be planting inside a formal tertiary degree. And we want someone to know how to do something technically well, but if you're an influence with permaculture, thinking.
So in Sweden, the permaculture was so good they got invited in to set up university courses and take courses in Australia.
Yeah, I'm sort of involved in a permaculture course, but an engineering or a town planning course, for example, an architecture course.
I'm led to think of the nervous system analogy, because the nervous system is like very plastic and 3D and non-linear. But then again, like its operating units, nerve cells are literally dendritic, right? They have dendrites, they have an axon, they have like a unidirectional flow. And so like you can almost very much like torture that metaphor and think of like subroutines of like vertical structures of orthogonal structures within like a broader horizontal structure.
Thank you. We are going to move on to look at the adult education pioneers or non-formal education pioneers, and then we're going to do an energizer and then change our subject. So, who is familiar with any of these names? And for people up the back, Jasper, do you mind reading them out?
Paulo Freire.
Thank you.
Yep. Gandhi. Socrates. Vandana Shiva. Ivan Illich. Emily Pankhurst.
Thank you. Someone tell me something about someone in an education context.
So Socrates taught by conversation in public space.
He's a philosopher in
ancient Greece.
Yeah. Through conversation, but also how did he structure his conversations? Yep. The Socratic method of asking questions to lead people to a place. He believed that education should be accessible by everyone at a time when education was only seen as something that the elite in their society could access. And what happened to him? How did he die?
He drank hemlock.
Why did he drink hemlock?
Because he was going to be publicly executed.
Why would he be publicly executed?
Because he made some people in power look stupid.
Well, actually, he worked with the young. So it's like this. He went into the marketplace and he said, okay, I'd like to talk to you all. And those who were interested gathered round, and often they were young. So why are you poor? Why are you poor, Judy?
Because I have no opportunity.
You have no opportunity. Why are you poor? Please, why are you poor?
Born into a poor family.
Yes, and some more reasons. Why are you poor?
Can't read.
Can't read. Why are you poor?
Can't study.
Yeah, and who has the power in our town?
The landowners.
The landowners, exactly. And what other power do landowners have?
Autocratic.
They do. And what else do they have? They own all the land, they
grow all the food.
They have control of the food.
They have control of the food, yes. And who makes all the laws?
The elite.
The elite. And who are the elite?
The landowners.
Yes, so is this a fair situation? What should happen? Who should be having more access to land and to decision making?
The people.
The people. Which people?
All
the people, right. What about you young ones?
Oh, that's enough, Socrates. You're challenging my system of power in this room.
Okay, that was Socrates. Questioning method from easy to difficult, from concrete to abstract, developing the conversation until they said, we'll knock you off.
Yeah, and he had a choice. He could either say everything that I've said is a lie, or I will die.
Or
he could have left town. He chose to drink hemlock rather than have the ideas that he generated in the community be discredited. Who else do people know about? Yeah, Judy?
Emma Pankhurst, the suffragette who campaigned for women to have a vote.
She's the one that put herself under the horse.
I think she got hit by a horse, I'm not sure.
She threw herself in front of the king's horse.
Yes.
She, they did pamphlets and things, did word of mouth.
They also did quite a few violent things that in Australia and New Zealand we had a much more peaceful transition to female suffrage. It was held up and held out for a lot longer. And
they disrupted race meetings and things that were considered really important.
And traffic.
So it's posters, wasn't it?
Posters, yeah.
So who haven't got the right to vote in this room? Which of you haven't got the right to vote?
All of the women.
None of the women. Right, why haven't we got the right to vote? Are we subhuman? Are we not capable? Do we not have brains? She had this sort of discussion, again often questioning about why we are. Do we not have property? No. Who owns our property? Who signs off on our property? No. Who has the bank accounts? Is this a fair situation for us all?
Women weren't even allowed to inherit.
That's right.
Even if they were the only child.
But they were prize bounty for marriage.
Yes.
Because they went with marriage.
But they were property themselves.
Yeah, property. And they still are in many countries, women of property. parts of Africa and Middle East. Women are bought and sold and traded across boundaries. Yeah, so that was Emily.
And Ro, can you summarise the story about her death?
Look, I can't remember it at the moment. Emily Pankhurst, I think it was a horse, wasn't it? She did shatter herself to number 10 Downing Street. Now there's always a policeman making sure you can't do it. So don't take advantage of it.
Okay, thanks.
Pick a different spot.
I think I saw footage of that really recently. It's remarkable. You can see very early film footage of like the horses coming around the round, and then among the last couple was apparently the king's horse. And it's just her emerging from the crowd. And taking out those horses. It's really. It's sort of like you can't really figure out what's going on at first because it's low quality, but then once you realise it, it's like, imagine that happening at the time.
Thank you.
It's obviously the tragic.
Vandana Shiva has not been hit by a horse.
No.
And is still with us, living in Dehradun in India. I've been to her farm, and she's advocating for the rights of all life, really, and especially, she started with ecofeminism and advocating for rights of women in India, and kind of broadened to the rights of peasant farmers, and she works a lot with peasant women in small communities and farmers in general to retain the rights of life in the community context rather than being patented or bought and sold by big corporations like Monsanto. And so she's big behind the non-GMO fight and the patenting kind of seed and things like that, and takes a lot of her teachings from Gandhian tradition, so the non-violent protest.
Yep. Yeah. Gandhi also believed, Vandana Shiva is still alive. She has a lot of enemies, but she's still alive. She has a lot of energy as well. Gandhi believed that we need to be teaching in our own local languages at a time when the British colonisers wanted everyone in India to be learning in English, right? And he was watching the decimation of language and believed very strongly that we needed to be learning in our own local languages. He also, in his teaching, yes, very much non-violent, coming from the non-violent approach, and that our learning needed to incorporate our heads, our hearts, our hands, and our spirits. And so it was a really holistic approach to learning than the more intellectual, just the mind focus that was coming from the British education system.
And he demonstrated it by saying all our cotton's going to England, where it goes into the mills and then it comes back and we have to buy it. So let's all spin our own cotton. And so the spinning was a symbol. And then let's not pay salt taxes to the British, it's our salt. And he led salt marches with hundreds of thousands of people. He said, the British are 200,000, we're 200 million, why are we putting up with this? The end result was independence for India. That's what he wanted above all, and that's what he achieved. And he introduced the concept of satyagraha. Satyagraha is if I want this, I have to accept to suffer. Therefore, I will starve until we get independence. And he would just go on these long fasts until the British gave in. And when the British took him to England, he proceeded to wear his dhoti and his shawl and would not dress as an Englishman, walking up the steps in his bare feet and his dhoti to go to the Parliament in the clothes. He never compromised. So he worked to a high ethical standard. And what happened to Gandhi?
Shots.
It's not a happy life in formal education.
And to summarise, Paulo Freire was exiled from Brazil. He saw the power structures in the favelas and the people who were making decisions about the people who lived in the favelas, and he decided that free education would help, and literacy, because people couldn't vote because they couldn't read. So if people could read, they could then vote about the people who were making decisions about their lives. And so he saw education, as everyone else has, as a tool of empowerment. And because of that, because of upsetting the people who were in power at the time, he was exiled from Brazil.
Specifically, he just taught, if you could sign your name, you could vote. Yeah. So he started the whole literacy campaign, which Mollison picked up, each one teach one, each one teach one, and that swept right through Central America And he taught everyone to write their names and read enough, and the result was that they got rid of the government. When they voted, they actually got rid of them because enough people could read and write when election time came around. A huge non-violent, non-formal education program, and it goes to this day. Each one teach one literacy in sort of that, in many of those Latin countries.
Thank you. So to summarise, it's very dangerous to be an education pioneer. You get stung on the face by a bee in the middle of your course. Did you? Not yet, but we can. He wrote Deschooling Society, which saw formal education as an indoctrination tool, and when you grade, you degrade. Thank you. He believed more in Skillshare and network and intergenerational learning. Deschooling Society is a very interesting read, very dry, but there's different interpretations, and I would recommend looking at his work. We just have to move on. So I was going to summarise. Pardon? I've never heard of it. Okay, great. To me, what it speaks to is the power of education and how important it is as educators ourselves to hold that within us as we move out into our communities and start designing education systems, deciding how we want to teach, who we want to teach, who we don't want to teach, and how we set up those educational systems or experiences.
Do you think the tiered independence were a small version of this?
A small version of the
community educating each other and attempting to have an influence and power.
Change the system? Yeah, I think so.
But also articulating capital in terms of its funding and in terms of its media exposure. So it's not straightforward kind of grassroots thing. It's a step in that direction.
I'm going to ask for that one to go on the sitting tree. It's huge. For now, if everyone can stand up, spin around twice and find a new seat. That would be great. So take your books with you. You can stay where you are, Kath.
Trying to see what I can
We're looking now at building our learner profiles, or being able to consider who our learners are. Why might it be important for us as educators to consider who our learners are, to build a profile?
And we know how to help them feel more likely to help them feel safe.
Yeah. And which sort of kind of concept. You know what they need to learn, which point they're starting from.
Thank you. And that teaching actually stick and worthwhile. It's not just us venting hot air.
Yep. So our content is relevant.
We can see the resources that lie within the learners.
Great, thank you.
Content's culturally appropriate.
Thank you. Yeah, what about course design? Not just content, but the overall course structure.
What's going to be useful for them? What they're going to want to learn and love to learn?
Yeah. How they want to learn? Yeah. What style of teaching you're going to need to adopt? Yeah.
What they might already know that we can go over more.
Again, moving now from content into structure, how does who our learners are determine the structure of our course?
Well, if they're children, you're going to want a different kind of class length and general organisation of the day.
Yep. Yeah, so how our days are
If
planned?
they're youth or teenagers, then it's different again. Or if they're Italian, they've got a bottle of wine on the table at lunchtime. So.
Exactly. If maybe you can't have a course on a Friday because Friday's a really important day in some religions, and so you can't have class on a Friday. Maybe everyone's driving, and so it's not a residential course, and you need to adjust when your course starts and finishes to avoid peak hour traffic. Maybe it's really hot and everyone needs to have a break after lunch, so you make a really long lunch break.
So far as the content's concerned, you really only change the exercises a bit. You're not changing the content much. So you're still talking about a kitchen garden, you're still talking about a food forest, you're still talking about indigenous forests. But if you're in the city, your example would be, how can we grow more kitchen gardens in the city, and where? Balconies, rooftops, public areas. And where are our zone 2 areas going to be? So you're adjusting a little bit for your examples, but you're not adjusting the content. It's important everyone who does PDC can talk to someone from another culture or religion or place about what they've learned, mutually understanding permaculture. So you don't immediately turn a whole PDC course into something quite different.
Yeah, and so the depth, I'm just thinking about patterns. The depth that you might go to in patterns, or the examples that you might use in patterns, would be very different depending on who your learners are. You might start just by saying, where does the sun come up and where's the shade on the tree? And throughout the day, how does the pattern of the sun and in relation to the tree change? Let's start looking at those patterns rather than big, much more complex patterns straight off the bat. What about language that we use? That would definitely change based on who your learners are. The pace at which you speak and the amount that you have to focus on your articulation is going to change depending on how many different languages are in your course. Whether you need to spend time translating all your materials or have a translator with you, that's going to depend based on who's in your course as well. Tamara, can you read the things that we're considering in a learner profile on this beautiful diagram?
Starting from any particular place?
Up to you.
I'm going to start with experience. Keep going.
Yeah, go on, right around.
Who, ages, how many, skills, education, hope. Oh, no, hopes.
Yeah, cool.
I was about to say no pets. Resources, roles and responsibilities, occupations, languages, other.
Other, great. Why might roles and responsibilities, or pets, that fits into roles and responsibilities, whether they have pets or not. What might that mean for us? Got to go with the crowd, you know. Why might roles and responsibilities and occupations impact the learners in your class?
Availability for the day of the week, whether you can make it or have to leave early.
Thank you. Whether they're the head of an organisation, whether they're a parent of 4 or 5 children, or 3 children, or an infant.
If they have livestock to tend.
Thank you.
Maybe you just want to have you're thinking of how you want to educate a variety of courses of different lengths, suits people with different lifestyles and responsibilities.
Great, 14 days straight PDC. Is that going to suit everyone? Is Wednesdays in the afternoon and Saturdays all day for 4 months? Is that going to be better for your learners? It depends on who your learners are and where you're teaching, absolutely. All right, can everyone find a space on their paper and we're going to spend the next 5 minutes writing down our own learner profile for who we'd like to teach. So a made-up group of people that we're going to pitch a course to.
And this afternoon, you'll say to your group, you are homeschoolers, you are business people, you are my local community, you are farmers, and you'll just address them and make that based on this. Imaginary in micro teaching, you'll say, well, this is who you are.
If you're already teaching regularly, you might do your learner profile for this exercise based on who it is you're already teaching, because you've got a lot of information and we can build that profile now. If you're not already teaching or you'd like to do this option, you can make up a group of people who you'd like to pitch a workshop to and consider what their profile might be. Yeah. Absolutely. No, you're right. If you've finished, would you like to find someone else who's also finished and share? Or have a conversation? There's a seat up the front if you'd like to run the brainstorm.
Yeah,
would you like to?
I'll run it, but I'll ask a couple of people to come and write.
Yeah.
Okay. And have you got various strengths and needs?
Yeah. Well, needs is currently underneath.
So if we
Needs
take
is under here, but we can change it.
No.
Thank you.
So what we'll do is we'll have 3 writers and 3 pens.
Yep.
Okay. And I'll just ask them. Best permaculture books I've ever seen, but they're all over the place, not in the library.
Yeah, in 2 minutes we're going to come back together and we'll have 15 minutes to go through this.
And then put that down and they can select.
It is hard to read, isn't it?
Yeah, they're really quite important.
I want to ask Brenda if she does her posters this big because of wall space, because of paper, saving paper.
Brenda's trying to save paper. Last course she was doing things on little bits of paper this big. But I think it's not worth it. Instead do a poster and keep it. And keep it next time and use it again when it is to try to do it very small to save paper. And if you've got this many people learning, you're investing in 32 people for that piece of paper. And to have them not able to read, who did this one? Is this a Greta?
Yeah.
If it's big enough to be yours.
It's a tension I have as well. Yeah. Thank you. Just a very brief teaching moment before we move on. Ro and I were just having a conversation about how to get people's attention. Ro yesterday stood very quietly. I think I did that this morning as well, and we have had the hand up. We were talking about maybe doing a click, but we decided that the decibels in the room, everyone was talking so much, we said, oh, that's actually not going to work. So we're going to go back to this. And you didn't know.
So once you tell people, if they hear the click start clicking, then it's spreads.
Yeah.
And the other one?
Oh, Rose one is to be a fish.
Not crazy enough there, right?
And then everyone starts being a fish. And it's very difficult to keep talking when you're being a fish.
So if you shout over a group where everyone's talking, then they'll get louder. And then you get louder and they get louder, and there's no end to it. And then the police come and say, okay, how was that? Did you enjoy doing that? You thought about the group?
Yeah.
All right. So we'll be talking some more in the next day or two about techniques and methods in working with different groups and what's important. But now we'd like to pretty much wrap up adult learners with an understanding that they bring strengths and some barriers and some needs. So we've got three colours. We've got the red, the orange and the purple. We need writers, while some of you call out what the barriers are or the strengths or the needs, and we'll put them in different colours. So can we have some board writers, please? Thank you. Good. Do you want a barrier or a need or a strength?
A barrier?
All right, I think orange.
I was going to ask for purple.
Oh, you've got it. There you go. So would the rest of you please call out barrier and then something to give it?
Predetermined bias.
Sorry?
Predetermined bias.
Yeah, biases. Yeah, we're trying to get it in one word. Yes.
Busyness.
The barrier.
It's time that's in.
Yeah.
Emotional unavailability or general adultness. Being jaded and cynical.
Is that Jade? Is that one right?
Just try to keep it to one word if you can.
Okay.
Attitude.
Yeah.
Attitudes.
Literacy and numeracy.
Negativity.
It is what I was
Preconception.
Was that maybe under bias?
Should go down.
Fear.
Yes.
That's what I meant. Some more?
Proximity.
Yeah. What makes it hard for you to go to courses?
Proximity.
Okay. Just personalise it a bit. Cost.
Childcare.
Responsibilities.
Think of yourself as a student.
It's a, like lack of openness to learn, like feeling like you already know everything. More like closed rigidity, maybe. Yeah, ossification. I don't know.
Okay.
Time availability up there already?
Which one's that?
Time availability is up there already. Like being time poor, say because you are tied into full-time work or something. Mental health.
Physical health.
Mental and physical.
COVID,
and we had chairs and classrooms.
And someone over here had mentioned about having family members or pets and things that are occupying their mental capacity when they're meant to be here.
Worried about
distractions. Yeah, distractions. So distractions. Mental load. Mental load.
Good expression. Okay, let's now try the next rock. Looks as if we're doing them one by one. What are some of the strengths of adult learners?
Experience. Intrinsic motivation.
Oh yeah, okay. I see you. Sorry, I thought people would call out all through, but we're doing it differently.
We misunderstood your instruction, I think. I did.
Motivation.
They're usually there because they've chosen to be.
Yep.
Resources? Maybe they have more resources.
Yeah.
Hopefully they're self-regulated. Self-regulation.
Yeah, very good.
Articulateness. Case in point.
What else, guys?
Come on, yeah, go on. Push the along. What do you bring to this? Come on, just think of what you brought to this yourself.
Knowledge.
Skills, knowledge, yeah.
Experience.
Expertise.
Yep, really good expertise a lot of the time.
Perspective.
Yeah.
Networks.
Yeah, good one.
Good habits of self-care and just
Yeah.
the ability to show up.
Hive mind.
Behaviour.
Yeah, often quite disciplined.
Yeah.
Exactly. Functioning. Some more? Come on, what else are you doing?
Participate.
Participatory? Yep.
Invested.
Yep. Some goals already in mind.
Direction. Passion.
Anything else?
Just general knowledge that, oh, sorry. No, I'm not talking about topic knowledge, I'm talking about
Life experience. Have long attention span.
That's very
How long is the attention span?
Alright, we'll leave those and you can add vision or break. What about some needs? Just think about yourself first and then think about your students when you're teaching. So what are the needs you have to be part of a class or a learning group? Personalise it for the moment. What are your needs?
Flexibility.
Time. Money.
Contemplation time. Sorry.
Money, what was that one, Shannon?
Contemplation time.
Good morning tea.
Yeah, stimulus.
Rest.
knowing that it's going to be relevant,
So
worthwhile doing.
Being heard.
Respect.
these are good.
So you can slide off, write them down.
We heard rest as well, Megan.
Rest.
Rest.
Not our rest.
That
rest.
comes on the 7th day of the school.
Out of one arm.
I realise what was happening.
Acknowledgement.
Acceptance of any differences you might bring.
Fuel, food. Fuel,
Fuel.
food.
Morning tea. What about lunch?
And dinner. And second breakfast.
Levity. Lift out, yeah.
Culturally relevant. Culturally situated.
Cultural.
Appropriate. I'm just trying to find a shorter word.
You also need
Cultural fit.
Safety.
And comfort, maybe.
authority. Like, as much as this is a horizontal space and everything like that, we do need to
Guidance.
appreciate the authority and experience of those that are teachers.
Mentors.
Structure, I guess, yeah.
Organisation, like is the
So authority or
Well, authority is like a proper word for it, but be open to
Leadership.
Yeah, leadership.
Leadership.
So,
leadership.
yeah.
Leadership.
Ethical leaders.
Yes.
The agreed group code.
With many of my I have a lot of elderly people. They need to know that they will be physically accommodated and safe in the space.
Yeah, accessibility.
As a stimulation, it's got to be something new.
Pardon, what was that?
Stimulation.
Stimulation.
Oh, that's a lot, isn't it? It's quite intimidating. Maybe it's time to go home. What do you reckon, Greta? Too hard, isn't it?
Still making you a belt.
That's what it's made. Okay, well, that's a pretty good list. You can add to it in time. Normally we'd sum up here by saying what learners need, and I've forgotten one of the words, is REX, which is when they've done research with students, formal or non-formal, they want respect, they want to feel safe above all, safe to speak, safe to contribute, safe to make a mistake. What's the E?
Enthusiasm.
They need an enthusiastic teacher who's got some degree can lift the energy a bit. Knowledge, good knowledge, so that relevance comes in somewhere, doesn't it? Where is it? Appropriate?
Above respect.
Okay. And they need to feel safe. So that's relevant, enthusiasm, knowledge and safety. And if you can provide those four things, that pretty much summarises that list and brings you into a place where the students will then start to learn happily without there being too many barriers.
A provocative question.
Go for it.
Is that any different to good children's learning? I'm not suggesting that, I'm just, it just poses a question. No one needs to answer it.
No.
But I wonder how different adult principles, good adult principles of learning are to good child-centered principles of learning.
Okay. Well, that's something can
That's morning
smell what's
job,
happening?
Yeah.
Would you please give me 2 minutes to finish the session?
Yes.
Just keep smelling and know something delicious is coming. Okay, so the last thing we're going to do, Stephen Brookfield is a fantastic, this is Stephen Brookfield's work, adult educator, probably one of the best around at the moment, and he's produced some myths that people have about adult learners. And one that we suffered from in Portugal was someone who tried to make every minute of every bit happy and laughing and joyful. And I think it would be exhausting.
Horrifying.
It's sort of like being a comedy on 24 hours a day for 14 days. It would be a lot. So adult learning should be a joyful process. So test that for yourself. How about it that some work is difficult? And if you feel safe, you're prepared to put some time and energy into doing it, or discipline yourself, or give something a go. And so, although it is good to feel safe, it doesn't have to be a comedy session all the time with lots of shrieking laughter. In a minute, I'm going to ask you to sort of say which one is important for you. Adults magically transform themselves, so become a permaculturist immediately. It's terrifying. The student comes to you at the end of a PDC and says, guess what, I'm just giving up my job as an engineer. I'm going to buy 5 acres of land and go and live north of Kalgoorlie. Have you got a mortgage? Yes. Have you got children? Yes. Is this the right time and moment, this transformation? Yes. So, you know, it's often a slower process through learning and a more considered one than just we're all permies together and isn't this wonderful. It can be, take aspects of it as you're ready, and as you mature and think about it, it moves on. Students are only learning when you can see them learning. So that's probably obvious to you, because I can see a lot of thought going on in your heads, and I can't see except that you look reflective.
People learn when they're sleeping.
Maybe, but there's very low efficiency, I understand. And that's yeah, so listening, reflecting is some people's style. They actually prefer to be reflective than to be active all the time. And only adults have learning styles and they're coming up. And the final one is it's only good when it meets the perceived learner's needs. This is a problem in development in general, where people say, what do you want? And they say they want plums. Actually, they need food. If people have come to learn, it's because they feel there's more to learn, and their perceived needs may be, I don't know enough, but precisely what they want, they're not sure. And that's the point of going through your hopes with the course, what you might learn, even expectations, to see whether you're meeting some of those perceived needs, but you don't always have to. If someone comes here and says, I thought we were bathing in mud every night, you say, well, hang on, we don't actually do that. Or if that's your perceived need, it isn't one of the things we do in the course. Or sometimes we can take you further than your perceived need. And that's very much what the permaculture course does. It stretches people to go more than what they think they wanted when they came. So that while you're here, I want to grow cabbages and lettuces organically. Good. The end of the course, what did you achieve? They had limited outcomes when they came. They haven't all, but some have.
We've had a bath in mud every night as well.
We've
had a mud bath every night as well.
Okay, so who would like to comment on that?
So, could you just write the guy's name that that's from? So I take a photo.
Stephen Brookfield, and he's a very, very good adult educator.
Is he American?
I think he might be, but I'm not sure. But this stuff is really worth looking at because, as I said, he plus something is. All right, well, we're finishing the session now, and the smell is sort of, you have to stop when the smell comes through the kitchen door. That's one of the things about design. The smell of lunch comes through. You really have to give up your morning session. Thank you for the extra time. I hope that we have a good break now, and we'll see you back again with Greta at 42. There you go. All right. Thanks, everyone. Thank you. We'll leave those for anyone who wants to take a photo of them.